Hello, everyone, and as always, welcome to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. And today we're going to continue on with our basic tutorial for Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2. Now, this is part two, and this time we're going to be focusing on the map and all of the information that you can get on the map to help you as you fight this war. And so you may remember last time we had gone over the admin tab, which is, as it says, administrative, saving games, that sort of thing. We had gone over the info screens, which are really your databases. It's a way to go and look at information as such as your commander's report, which is the most important of them, where you can sort, filter, figure out losses, what's being produced. You can go through all of those kinds of numbers. They're really like databases. Now we're on to the first, we're taking it third, but it's the first tab, the map info tab. And this is how you actually put different icons on the map to get information on the map visually. All right, so I've got us booted up here to the initial screen that you will see when you're going to play the grand campaign from the Axis side. We are in the air planning phase. Now, air planning is actually the second phase of every other turn other than the first one. In the first turn, logistics has already sort of default happened, right? Because it was what it was. The games or the logistics were what they were at the start of the war. Once you get to turn two, the first phase is always the logistics phase. The first phase of your turn is always the logistics phase. The AI will actually run all of that. There's no way that you can manually do anything during that phase. It all is dependent on what you've done in previous turns with your depots and your railways and all of those things. It's dependent on that, but there's nothing you can do when the logistics phase is actually running. The second phase is this air planning phase, and that's where we are right now. And so if you look down on the map, you will see air commands, Luftwaffe 1, 1 Flieger Corps, what I call core level air commands like Koloft 18. You can see those visually represented on the map. You can also see the ground units. And now we talked about keeping these icon colors when we did the options. This is why you can really see the differentiation between 18th Army, which is here in purple, uh, 4th Panzer Group, which is here in a neon pink, 16th Army, which is in a light pink, and so on and so forth. So you can really tell the difference in commands of your ground units. Now, generally speaking, and we'll zoom in here, well, let's zoom out first. There are 5 zoom levels, so you can go all the way to go look across the front if you want to, all the way out. You just do this with your mouse wheel. You can come in one, you get more detail, and so on and so forth till you get all the way up to the max zoom level. Now, if we go look at 18th Army here, now again, we're not in the ground phase, and so it's covered up a little bit with all of these air commands. But if we go down here and look, you can see this is a division. It's a German division in the 18th Army. It's got the NATO symbol. It's infantry. We will come back and look at this, but I just wanted to point out what these are. Generally, you're going to have infantry divisions, you're going to have headquarters out here on the map, you'll have motorized divisions. There's a headquarters, you see HQ. There are security units out here, and we'll come back to unit counters and kind of go through everything that's on a unit counter. But I just kind of wanted to show you what is this on the map? What are those little counters? Well, they're generally divisions in your army. And of course, these are the Soviet divisions or headquarters, so on and so forth out here. So what about this bar across here? So when we were on info screens, these were the icons. Now we're on map info, and then we've got brand new icons here in the top bar. So we could toggle units on and off if we wanted to go down and see the terrain a little closer, see, is there a river there? Is there not a river there? You can do that there. And of course, the hotkeys are right up here in the corner. So if you just want to do it that way, you can look right up there and do it. This is zoom level. We can't zoom in anymore, but we could zoom out, and you can do it like this if you'd rather not do it with your mouse wheel. I don't know how the heck we ended up all the way down there. Um, And so these are zoom levels. Now, what is this button? This button actually, and I'll turn it off for a second so you can really see it, it shows Soviet-controlled hexes in a sort of a light pink color. Our hexes as the axis are this kind of lighter green. As turns go on, if we take territory, these will turn kind of a darker green, so you can very visually see where did your front start this turn, what have you taken, what's still a Soviet hex or Soviet controlled hex, which is generally the last unit counter that moved through there controls the hex, all right? And that can have an effect because there are certain units that you can't move through an enemy controlled hex or next to an enemy controlled hex, like a headquarters, for instance. So, if a headquarters is all on its own, it can't get up next to Soviet controlled hexes. And so I like to have this on because it's very important to know who controls that hex or for game purposes is considered to have control of the hex. Again, if you take it off, you just can't tell. What's the next one here? This is fort level, and let's toggle that on. And you see these twos pop up here. What are those? Well, every hex has a quote unquote fort level, and it's really the defensiveness of that hex. Now, some hexes have a natural defense level. But also, if a combat unit sits in a hex or is at a hex at the end of a turn, it builds man-made fortifications there over that week, that it's in that hex, since every turn is a week. And so these that are two, if the Soviets left units sitting there, by the next turn, next week, it may be 2.6 or 2.5, 2.8, who knows? Um, they build based on a construction value that a unit has that's in the hex. We'll get into that during, that topic. But the point is essentially every hex could potentially have a fort level. That makes it more defensible. It makes it harder to attack. Essentially, you have to kind of tear down that fort level before you can even engage in combat with the enemy unit. And so it's a good thing to know. We'll take that off. The next one is rail damage info. And what is this? What are you, playing a railroad tycoon? Sort of, in some respects. Given the vast distances in the Soviet Union, rail was incredibly important. First to the Axis and then later to the Soviets for moving freight, for moving supply, fuel, bullets. Arguably, it's the most important thing in the game are your rail lines. And so how does the game model that? Well, one of the difficulties is that Soviet rail is different than German rail. And so my understanding is that Soviet rail at the time anyway was wider than German rail. And so none of the German rail cars would go over Soviet railways. And so the Germans actually had to go in and rip it up in many cases and completely replace the rail lines so they could get their own rail cars through. All right. The game actually simulates all of that, if you can believe it. Now, if we look out here on the map, these are minor railways. All right. And then you also have what are called double line railways. So just think of them as, a smaller railway, a larger railway that can carry more freight. And it's this kind of ribbon here. But the problem is regardless of how big it is, the Germans couldn't use it if it was Soviet rail. And so what you see, and I'm going to back up here a little bit so you can see it, is that the green rail is usable by the Germans or the Axis. All right. The yellow rail is provisionally available. It's fine, but the green is better. You want them to be green, but you can't repair these. They will be repaired by backup construction units. We'll get into that at some point. But you do have a specialized unit called a rail unit, and you have four of these. Excuse me, as the Germans. You also have one Romanian rail repair unit. All right, so if I click off that and I click on this icon down here and you look up here, it's called FBD4. All right, FBD4 is a railroad unit, and you will be moving it down rails to repair them, quote unquote, actually to kind of rebuild them to German specifications. That's an important part of the game. Arguably in War in the East 1, it was the most important part of the game. And so we will be moving those out, repairing rail. And how do we know what's been repaired or what is good German rail now that we can use? By this. And what you need are these to be green. Now there's fog of war here, right? Um, Oh, let me back up for a second. Actually, what this yellow means is it's next to Soviet hexes. Rail cannot move next door to Soviet hexes. And so this is showing you the rail is good, but you can't move any freight through here because it's next to a Soviet hex. All right, sorry about that. Wanted to make sure we got the right information there. Okay, so green means it's usable by the Axis, by the Germans in this case. We have fog of war on, so we can't see it, but all of these, for the most part, will be red. And every red one, you've got to take that railroad unit along here. It has movement points. You can see it has 16. And it also has this thing called RRC, which is rail repair cost. When you get on one of these red circles, this will pop up for the cost in movement points it is to repair the rail. You'll have to click this. It'll be like hyperlinked right there. You'll click it, and that will start to repair that rail. And by the time the next turn comes around, then hopefully it will be repaired and you can start to move freight through there. But we'll get much more into railroad repair. For our purposes here, the important thing is this is the map info screen where you can see what's repaired and what's not. And now that I've said it, and also what you cannot ship freight down because it's next to a Soviet hex. All right. What do we have here? Toggle combat delays on and off. Now, this is a new thing in this game. We have it on, but you don't see anything. Why is that? Well, because no combat has happened yet. We're in turn one. When you do have combat, and let's just say this infantry unit, the 21st Infantry Division over here, attacked these Soviet units, all right? And let's say it won the battle, and off they go. They retreat back. There will be a black circle here with a number in it. And that number will be if this unit moves through that hex, how many additional movement points it costs to do so. It's essentially um, it's modeling the fact that this unit has fought a battle there, and then to move on out of that hex would cost additional movement points by the time they reorganize, get all their stuff together, packed up, whatever. So it essentially gives you a penalty in movement points for getting out of a hex where there has been combat the during that turn. And so this shows you how many points that would be. I would keep that on. It is good and useful information to know. The next is also a new button to this game, and it says Show Command Efficiency and Command Quality. And you can go down here and put on this little thing that looks like a cell tower, right? And you can see units that have good, what's this first one? Command efficiency, meaning they are getting really good command from their generals. You can also see command quality, and that would be units that have exceptional commanders, really. And so efficiency shows you, are these units in command? And we'll talk about that when we talk about headquarters and leadership. And the second one shows you kind of the quality of that command. All right. But we'll get into that more when it comes to commanders. The important thing to know now is you can go look if you're curious. Uh, this is toggle unit modes isolated on or off. And what does that mean? Well, as you'll see, we really don't have anything that is with a red box around it. As Soviet units at the start and German and Axis forces later, as they get surrounded, and so they are basically in a circle or a box here where they have German hexes completely surrounding them. So we move our armies out here, we move them out here, they meet up. There is not one place where these pink hexes come into that encirclement. They will be what is called isolated. It means they can't get supply from the outside. They can't get anything from the outside unless it's flown in, right? And they become isolated. When units in this game become isolated, they really, really surrender and rout, which we'll get into. But they do not fight. They'll do that much easier, and they do not fight nearly as well. So even if they would normally have, let's say, a 15 defense combat value, once they're isolated, it may be only a 5, for instance. I'm making up numbers there, but that's just as an example. Their combat value will go way down, and their ability or their fortitude not to surrender will go way down. They have a tendency just to throw their hands up in the air when they're isolated. And that's a big part of this game, right? From the start, where the Axis is trying to encircle or envelop as many of these Soviet forces as they can to get them to surrender so that they can move on, the Germans can move on faster, and also because they don't have to use up precious material and men trying to fight those units. The units just give up. And so you can see which of these units are isolated. If you have that on, they will be a red type color. Um, the next one is show supply priority on or off. Now down to the headquarters level, the core headquarters level, you can now set what is called supply priority. And so if we put this on, this shows a colored representation of it. The higher the priority of units, this neon green is priority level 4, which is the highest. Yellow is actually 2, priority level 2. This forest green is priority level 3. And I don't see, well, here's one. Orange is priority level 1. Okay, and so as we get into supply more, this would make a little more sense. But the basic idea is units can have a priority level when it comes to logistics. And so if they're a higher level, like a priority level 4, they will get, generally speaking, more supplies than something set at a 3, 2, or 1, and so on and so forth down the chain, right? A 3 will get more than a 2 will get more than a 1, and so you can kind of really manually control where a lot of your supply fuel is going out to, which is a difference in this game in some respects and a much needed improvement. But you can see that on the map by these colors. And I've noticed, as I played the game, that these colors, generally speaking, are those kind of levels, meaning neon green is almost always 4 or the top level. This dark forest green that you see here is pretty much always priority level 3. Yellow is pretty much 2, and orange is 1. 0 would be red. All right. So it's like you're sitting at a stoplight, except for this forest green and neon green. It kind of really lights up when you're at a 4, and so that is your supply priority level, and you can show that right on the map. Now then, this is also a new screen. It's called Logistics Info, and this Logistics Info will pop up here. Now, I was going to scoot down actually. You can't see it because we're not out in the Soviet Union, but this will actually start showing you where stuff is moving down your rail lines as well once we get into the Soviet Union. But here it shows depots, and depots are very important to supply in this game. And so you can bring this up, and also ports are very important to your supply chain. And so you can bring this up and see where your depots are. Oh, back here in Germany, we can actually see it. This is supply is ready to run through this. This railway is ready to go. This is double rail. This is the single rail. So when it's operational and ready to go, you can see it here like that in green, and it'll kind of show you your supply network. All right. Now then, we've got factory locations on and off, and you can see the different kinds of quote unquote factories. Now, this is manpower, which isn't really a factory, but it does show you something that goes into kind of the big strategic overview, right? And so this has got a port, a rail yard, and manpower. We've got fog of war out here, so you can't really see that. So let's move back. Yeah, here. So in this town, what is this? This is Slotkin, right? It's got arms manufacturing, it's got a port, it's got manpower. What is that one? Oh, it'll tell us down here. See production. It makes vehicles here, armaments production. It's got a port, rail yard, manpower, resource production, synthetic fuel. You can go through that. It's got heavy industry here. That can all be represented on the map. Now, as you get in the game, you'll, kind of see that you don't really control production. The AI does that, and it's sort of an abstraction, but it's important, of course. And as you lose towns or you take over towns, you can either hurt the Soviets' production as you take over towns, or you can lose production yourself if the Soviets take over a town that, let's say, is producing, tanks. You would get less tanks. And so while you can't go into the factories and say, hey, I want more T-38 or T-38, Panzer III tanks, if you can't directly go in and say that you want that, um, it is, production can be affected by the tides of war. This is city capture dates on and off. Now, this is kind of cool. I like this. This is new. It shows you the actual historical date that the city was captured by the Axis and then recaptured by the Soviets. And some of these towns, it's back and forth a little bit. And so June 27th, 41, it was controlled by or captured by the Axis. July 30th, 44, by the Soviets. Then the Axis recaptured it in August of 44, and then the Soviets finally took it in August 6th of 44. Why is this important, or why would you, care other than historical curiosity? Well, it can give you benchmarks, right? Maybe these early ones can't, but if we go look, I'm actually curious, um, when were some of these things taken, like Peskov? Peskov's a very important place. Here's Peskov. July 9th, 41 is when the Axis took it. So as the Axis player, as I'm going along, if I get up here and it's July 30th when I take Peskov, I'll say, oh wow, I'm 3 weeks behind schedule compared to what the Axis did or in historically. So I think it's kind of cool in that respect. Also, on the flip side, as the Soviets start to turn the tide at some point, they can go and see what their benchmarks are. So I like that. This icon, I've been playing with it on since the game came out. It's kind of a new thing. It shows you the road networks, and you may say, well, of course you would have this on. Why wouldn't you want to see where the roads are? And I guess that's a fair point. But really, the roads themselves don't matter. If you look at, and we just hover over this hex, every hex has a road value that's kind of a great amalgamation of all the roads in this 10 square mile hex. And so if you look at this, it's Soviet Union, Latvia, poor roads. Okay, so they can either be poor, non-existent, or good. Is that right? I don't know. Let's get up here. Average roads. What's in Berlin? What's the best we can have? There are three levels. Well, let's look in Dresden. Dresden has good roads. All right. What does this little town have? Good roads. So you can have good, average, or poor it seems. Um, and that will affect movement costs for motorized units, of course. It will also affect supply and how hard it is to get to supply out to certain hexes based on the hexes that it takes to get out there, how good their roads are. And so this is just kind of a general rating of the roads out here. So you'd say, okay, well, maybe I don't need the actual specific roads that are on here, and these are the major roads, right? Well, I've just found in playing that usually if there is a road icon moving through a hex, it's at least average, all right? Whereas if you get out here, now of course this is swamp, it's poor. Is this one poor? This one's poor, but we don't see any roads, here. Now, if we go up here, it's average again, right? So it does give you somewhat of it. Now, I'm not saying that's a perfect method, but it does give you kind of a visual representation of where there may be at least average roads, all right? Um, yeah, so I've been playing with that one on. Now we have weather. Now there are four things you can pick here. This is just the general weather tab that you could have here. It's air and ground. You can see the weather here on the ground. You could see weather in the air, or you could see, I think this is, hold on. Wow, it takes a while for that to click. Sorry. Or you could see no weather. All right. And so why is there a differentiation there? Well, the weather in the air is really all about cloud cover because you're talking about bombing, in the air. So you're talking about bombing, and what really matters is whether there's cloud cover or not. On the ground, it matters whether there is rain so that there could be mud, snow, precipitation leading to muckier ground. And so that's why you can see the different modes and methods. Now, also, if we hit W, we can see the weather conditions. We could have also seen that on those info tabs. And so you can see what's on the way. And this is also broken down the same way. Weather ground, what it's like on the ground. Or we could click on weather air and you can see whether it's clear, rainy, heavy rain, you get it. Um, and so that's the differentiation. Now you can see this is a weather front and it is raining out here. It's all blue. And so you know it's raining in these areas. All right. But you can also see that out on the map once we get to moving. So that's weather. Victory locations. Now these victory locations will tell you what you get here if you take this town in this scenario. All right, so it's scenario specific, and you can get a bonus by getting here by a certain time. That's what that is. Um, Interdiction levels. Now, this really goes to interdiction out at sea. We don't see any at all here. I can tell you, just now having started the campaign, the Soviets have interdiction going on here. What is that? Well, that is really naval bombing. So they're trying to keep German boats, ships, cargo, whatever, to get to this port. So they're interdicting, or they're also afraid of maybe a naval and amphibious attack here. So they're also interdicting. I guess it wouldn't be cargo yet. We don't control it. So at the start, anyway, it's really to guard against an amphibious assault out here, I would imagine. And we'll get into interdiction more as we get into the air war. And so that's interdiction. There was none. Let's go see if can we see any of it on the map? I'm just wondering if there is any. I guess not. I guess not. There probably is some down around Odessa too, but I haven't looked yet. Um, this is air recon levels. You can see them out on the map. Now, we haven't run any air missions yet. That's also why we kind of have complete fog of war. But this will show you the different recon levels for each hex of the map, and they will turn different colors depending on the recon level. You can also see air directive targets out on the map, and we'll talk more about air directives. So these are all letting you see things that kind of relate to the air war. You can also see city flak, meaning there are anti-aircraft guns in the city. To the extent that you've discovered them with your recon, you can see them on the map. You can also see anti-aircraft that you know about that are in units. And so if your planes have been shot at, they will report back, hey, they have anti-aircraft in Riga, or they have anti-aircraft in this Soviet unit. You can go see that on the map. Okay, now during the air planning phase, you have these icons on this second icon bar. All right. But we are going to go through that when we go through the air war. They're not going to really make sense to you now. The only one that is consistent between the air planning phase and the ground phase, because when you get to the ground phase, these are all different on the secondary bar. The only one that's the same is show battle sites, and you can show ground battles. Well, you can show all battles here, air and ground. You could show ground battles, or you can show all of the air battles that have happened. And you can go out to those sites and read the entire combat summary for that. And that's the one that is consistent between air and ground, this ribbon here. All right. You've got air doctrine, air directives. We'll get into that, of course. Air execution phase detail. So this is how much you're told when your planes actually go out and fly missions. You're going to get summaries of that as it goes along, and you can tell it how detailed to get as it happens. All right. Here you can have the AI do depot management for you. So these are the two kind of AI buttons. Now, this is already pushed for us because I had selected for the AI to help us with the air war, and so it's automatically pushed down. You don't have to select anything, but this you would have to select for the AI to help you with your logistics chains. Again, that's for the logistics section. Here we have a factory navigation panel. Again, you can go down deep into the factory production. Panzer II chassis, where are they being made? Breslau, Nuremberg, Warsaw. You can go and, find all this out. Unfortunately, or fortunately maybe, you can't change any of it. And so it's very interesting indeed, but there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Then you just have the helpers. There are a lot of keys, hotkeys, and also when you do deliberate attacks, for instance, where you have to push down the shift key or the control key. That's what that is. All right. Um, let's then go over here and talk about these items. First of all, this is the city box. And let me get off of the production. All right. What do I mean the city box? Well, let's go to a German city like Königsberg, all right? And there's Königsberg, you can see it in the pop. So anytime you go over a hex, you will get general information about that hex, all right? If it's a city and has more going on there, you could get even more information like Königsberg. If we select that hex, then it pops up here, what I call the city box for Königsberg. Then you could click on that and get information about the name of the town, obviously supply, fuel, nation, its axis, population. I think that's in thousands. So this is that right? Would it be 170,000 or 1.7 million? I think that's actually in hundreds of thousands, right? And so this would be 1.7 million. Priority. Now we'll go into depots. That's about the depot again. How much anti-aircraft or construction units you've assigned here, or it allows you to do it if you want to. It will show you units that are attached to that city, including this flak regiment, which is AA. You can also decide to expand the air base right here if you want to. And so this gives you information about the city. You can also, there is a port here, you can see that. There is a level 2 airfield. There are 3 different levels of airfield on the map. There is level 1, and level 1 will show 1 runway. There is level 2, and you can see 2 rail or 2 runways here. And we'll have to go back to Berlin, I believe, to show you a level 3. That's a level 3 uh, airbase. I'm sorry. I hope I said air base before. I was trying to think runways, railways. No, these are air bases. Uh, and now let's be honest, there were a heck of a lot more than one air base in Berlin. What they've tried to do is say, what was the historical capacity in and around Berlin? Let's then represent that as one air base. All right. And so that's why it's a level 3. When we get into the air war, we'll talk about the different sizes, but essentially, a level 1 can handle up to 100 single engine aircraft, 50 two-engine aircraft, 25 four-engine aircraft, okay? A level 2 airport can handle up to 200 engines, so 200 single engine, you get the idea. A level 3 can handle up to 400 engines, all right? And that's trying to replicate the big, massive planes that have 4 engines, take up a lot more space at the airbase. There is that. This is the depot, if there is a depot in the town, and its priority level. These are APs. APs are administrative points. You can use those to change your generals that are in charge of your armies or your corps or your army groups or your air generals. You can change those as well. You use these points. It also costs points to build depots or air bases. All right, and you can do that in this game. You can build depots or air bases. This obviously is the date and the turn number. This right here is what we call the soft factor selection. And what is that? Well, if we zoom all the way in here and we just take this counter right here, 26th ID, you will see on this counter at 26th ID, it's got a green indication here in the corner. All right, why is that? Well, that's because we have picked supply as the soft factor that's shown on the counter. You could pick none, and if we do that, you'll see they go away. But you might as well get more information rather than less. We could pick morale, experience, supplies, fuel, ammo, units attached to it, supply priority, combat prep, and fatigue. Okay, you could pick any one of those, and they will be in the what's the best way of saying this? The level of that thing will be shown on the corner. And you may say, what the heck do you mean by the level of that thing? Well, essentially, if it's over 80%, if it's a good thing like supply, it's green. And every 20% it goes down, it changes color to the point where if it's under 40%, it will turn red, and that will let you know that that item is very low on supply. Now, of course, fatigue works just the opposite. If you've got zero fatigue, it's green. All the way up to, I think, 60%, it would turn red, right? So good things go from green to red, bad things go from green to red, but in the opposite direction. Okay, and you can set and pick here what you want to see on your counters. I pretty much always have that at supplies. Now, sometimes if I want to see if my motorized divisions, how they're doing on fuel, I may change that over to fuel. All right, but usually on supply. You want to see what's low on supply. The final button here is this F12 button. That is move on to the next phase. So this would be execute air directives. That's phase 3. The AI will do that based on the directives that happened here in phase 2. That's what you do in air planning is give it directives, or the AI does. And when you execute that, you move to phase 3. The AI does all of that. All of a sudden, you pop out. You're in phase 4, which is the ground movement phase. And as I said, this ribbon will change for the ground movement phase, and we'll go through all of that when we talk about ground combat. Okay, I'm going to call this an episode for now. When we come back next time, we'll kind of hover over some of the hexes and see all the information that you can see out there. We'll talk about the counters themselves. We'll also talk about these air command boxes that are out here. We'll go into all of that next time in part 3. So this has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. Thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully you're finding this helpful. Please leave comments, questions, anything that you've got down in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer them. All right. Thank you so much. Strategy Gaming Dojo. I'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.